My best friend confessed to sleeping with my boyfriend, but her timeline had a major problem. My best friend Rachel and I had been inseparable since middle school. She was there when I met my boyfriend Alex 3 years ago at her birthday party. She was my maid of honor when we got engaged last spring. She helped me pick out our apartment, went furniture shopping with us, and even had a spare key for emergencies. Alex and Rachel got along fine, but never hung out without me, which I appreciated because it meant no weird dynamics. Everything was perfect until last Tuesday when Rachel asked to meet me for coffee and said she had something important to tell me. She sat there crying for 10 minutes before finally saying she'd been sleeping with Alex for 2 months. She said it started after my work trip to Dallas, that Alex had come over to help fix her sink, and one thing led to another. She described how guilty she felt, how it happened 4 more times, always at her place when I was at my night classes. She knew details like the birthmark on his hip, the scar on his lower back from falling off his bike, things only someone who'd seen him undressed would know. I threw up in the coffee shop bathroom while she sat there sobbing about how sorry she was. When I got home, Alex was cooking dinner like nothing had happened. I couldn't even look at him. I told him I was sick and went to bed. He brought me soup and rubbed my back while I pretended to sleep. The next morning, I called in sick to work and started going through everything, trying to figure out how I'd missed it. That's when things got weird. Rachel said it started after my Dallas trip, but that was 8 weeks ago, not 2 months. She said they met at her place on Thursday nights when I had classes, but my classes were on Wednesdays. She said the first time was when he fixed her sink, but I checked our texts and she'd never mentioned a broken sink. I drove to Rachel's apartment building and talked to her neighbor, Mrs. de Torres, who saw everything that happened in that hallway. I said I was planning a surprise party and needed to know if Alex had been by recently without me. Mrs. Torres said she'd never seen Alex at Rachel's place alone, only when I was there too. But she had seen Rachel's ex-boyfriend Carlos there multiple times in the past 2 months, usually on Thursday nights. Carlos, who had the same build as Alex. Carlos, who also had a birthmark on his hip from when they dated 2 years ago. Carlos, who'd fallen off his skateboard and had a lower back scar that Rachel used to joke about. I checked Rachel's Instagram, and she'd been posting about being lonely, about how some girls got all the luck. Her last 3 posts were cryptic quotes about deserving love and not accepting less than you deserve. Her friend Janet had commented, asking if she was okay, and Rachel replied that she would be soon. I went back through our messages and found something else strange. 3 weeks ago, Rachel had asked weirdly specific questions about Alex's work schedule, when he went to the gym, and what nights I was home versus at classes. She'd said she was planning a surprise for our engagement party, but that party happened 6 months ago. I called Alex's gym and pretended to be checking on his membership renewal. They confirmed he was there every Thursday night from 7 to 9, exactly when Rachel claimed they were together. His keycard was scanned in and out at those exact times. The gym was 40 minutes from Rachel's place. He couldn't have been at both places. Then I remembered Rachel had been acting strange since her company passed her over for promotion. The job went to another woman who was also engaged, and Rachel had said it was unfair that couples got everything. She'd started making comments about how relationships were just luck, not about being a good person. She'd said I didn't appreciate what I had. But here's what made everything click. Rachel didn't know that Alex had installed a tracking app on both our phones after his brother's car got stolen. We could always see where the other was for safety. I checked the history for every Thursday night she claimed they were together. Alex was at the gym, then home, never at Rachel's apartment. Not once. So either Alex had left his phone at the gym while secretly visiting Rachel, which made no sense because he needed it for his workout music, or Rachel was lying about the whole thing. I decided to test it. I told Rachel I forgave her and wanted to work through it, but I needed her to tell me everything that happened. She started adding more details. She said he always wanted the lights off because he was self-conscious. Alex slept with a nightlight because of childhood fears. She said he brought wine every time. Alex was allergic to sulfites and couldn't drink wine. Every single detail she added was wrong, but they were all things Carlos used to do when they dated. She was describing Carlos but putting Alex's name on it. When I asked why she was doing this, she broke down. Her face got all red and blotchy, and she started crying even harder than before. She kept trying to talk between these big gasping sobs that made her whole body shake. Finally, she got out that she wanted what I had. She said everything good always happened to me while she got nothing. She actually said she thought if Alex cheated on me, I would finally understand what it felt like to lose something important. I just sat there staring at her, not believing what I was hearing. This was my best friend since we were 12 years old. We'd shared everything. I'd been there when her dad left, when she failed her driver's test twice, when her first boyfriend dumped her at prom. And now she was telling me she tried to destroy my life because she was jealous. Rachel kept talking, wiping her nose on her sleeve like a little kid. She said she'd been jealous for months, ever since her company passed her over for that promotion. She had to watch me plan my engagement party while she was getting rejected for a job she'd worked 3 years to earn. She said watching me be happy made her feel worse about her own life. The woman who got the promotion was engaged too, and Rachel said it felt like the universe was rewarding people in relationships while punishing her for being single. She thought if she could make me believe Alex betrayed me, it would level the playing field somehow. Like if I was miserable too, she wouldn't feel so bad about her own problems. I couldn't even process how messed up that was. She didn't just want to vent to me or ask for support, she wanted to actively hurt me. I finally found my voice and asked her if she realized how sick this was. I told her she tried to destroy my relationship and my trust in the person I loved most. My hands were shaking as I talked. Rachel just kept saying she was sorry over and over, rocking back and forth on her couch. She said she didn't think it through. She just wanted me to hurt like she was hurting. She said once she started the lie, she couldn't figure out how to stop it. Every time I asked for more details, she had to make up more stuff to keep the story going. She said she knew it was wrong, but she was so angry at the world that she couldn't stop herself. That made me even more upset. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment thing. She'd planned this. She'd asked me those weird questions about Alex's schedule weeks ago. She'd thought about what details would make the story believable. She'd practiced her crying before meeting me at that coffee shop. I stood up because I couldn't sit there anymore. I grabbed my purse and my phone and headed for the door. Rachel jumped up and tried to grab my arm, begging me to stay so we could talk more. I pulled away from her and told her we were done. She started crying harder and saying she would do anything to fix this. I said there was nothing to fix because our friendship was over. I walked out and heard her calling my name as I went down the hallway, but I didn't look back. Mrs. Torres was getting her mail and gave me a concerned look, probably because I was crying too by that point. I got to my car and just sat there for a minute, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The drive home felt like it took forever, even though it was only 15 minutes. My hands were shaking, so bad I had to focus really hard on keeping the car steady. I kept replaying everything Rachel had said, trying to make sense of how someone I'd known for so long could do something so horrible. When I finally pulled into our parking spot, I sat in the car for another few minutes trying to calm down. I didn't want to fall apart the second I walked in. I checked my face in the mirror and wiped away the mascara that had run down my cheeks. Then I took a deep breath and went inside. Alex was on the couch watching some cooking show, and the second he saw my face, he knew something was really wrong. He jumped up and asked what happened. I tried to start talking, but my voice came out all weird and shaky. He led me to the couch and sat down next to me, holding both my hands. I told him everything. The fake confession, the timeline problems I'd found, talking to Mrs. Torres, checking his gym records and the phone tracking, confronting Rachel with the wrong details, and finally her admission that she'd made the whole thing up because she was jealous. I showed him all the evidence I'd collected on my phone, the gym confirmation email, the tracking app history, the screenshots of Rachel's Instagram posts. Alex went really pale as I talked. When I finished, he asked if I'd actually believed he cheated. His voice was so quiet and hurt. I admitted that for about a day and a half I was totally devastated and confused. I said I didn't want to believe it, but Rachel knew details that seemed impossible to fake. But then I noticed all the timeline problems and I couldn't ignore them. I told him I decided to investigate before confronting him because the evidence didn't add up. I said I trusted our relationship enough to look for the truth instead of just accepting what Rachel told me. Alex pulled me into a hug and held me really tight. He said he was just glad I trusted us enough to dig deeper. He said a lot of people would have just believed the accusation and ended things without checking. We spent the rest of the evening on the couch talking through everything. Alex admitted he felt really hurt that Rachel would try to destroy us like that. He said he'd always thought of her as a friend too, not just my friend. He'd helped her move furniture last year and fixed her computer when it crashed. He said it felt violating to know she'd been planning to break us up while pretending to care about both of us. He asked if I thought she was actually unstable or just mean. I said I honestly didn't know anymore. The Rachel I thought I knew would never do something like this. But clearly I didn't know her as well as I thought. We ordered pizza because neither of us felt like cooking, and we stayed up late just processing everything that had happened. I barely slept that night. I kept thinking about all the years of friendship and wondering how much of it was real. The next morning, I called my sister while Alex was in the shower. I told her everything about Rachel's confession and her admission that it was all fake. My sister started yelling into the phone about what a psycho Rachel was. She said she wanted to drive over to Rachel's apartment right now and tell her exactly what she thought of her. I told her to please let me handle this my way. I said I needed to figure out how to move forward without making everything worse. My sister said fine, but if Rachel ever came near me again, she was going to have words with her. I appreciated that my sister had my back even if her first instinct was to go confront Rachel. After I hung up, I realized I needed to tell our mutual friends what happened before Rachel could spin her own version of events. I knew she'd probably try to make herself look better or claim I'd misunderstood something. I decided to start with Jen, who'd known both of us since freshman year of college. Jen had been at Rachel's birthday party where I met Alex. She'd been a bridesmaid at our engagement party. If anyone would understand the full scope of what Rachel had done, it would be Jen. I texted her asking if she could meet for coffee that afternoon. She wrote back right away saying yes and asking if everything was okay. I said I needed to talk to her in person. We met at the same coffee shop where Rachel had made her fake confession, which felt weird, but it was halfway between our apartments. Jen got there first and already had a table. She looked worried when I sat down. I didn't waste time with small talk. I told her everything from the beginning. Rachel's confession, my investigation, the evidence I found, and Rachel's admission that she'd made it all up out of jealousy. I showed Jen the same evidence I'd shown Alex. The gym records, the phone tracking, the Instagram posts, all of it. Jen's mouth actually fell open as I talked. She kept saying she couldn't believe it. When I finished, she said Rachel had been acting strange for the past few months. She'd been making bitter comments about couples whenever they hung out. She'd posted weird cryptic stuff on social media that Jen thought was just Rachel being dramatic. Now it all made sense as part of this jealous breakdown Rachel had been having. I spent the rest of that week reaching out to our other friends one by one. I called my friend Emma first and asked if we could meet for lunch. She agreed right away, and we met at this little sandwich place near her work. I told her everything about Rachel's fake confession and showed her all the evidence I'd collected. Emma sat there with her mouth open the whole time. She said she couldn't believe Rachel would do something so messed up. Then she mentioned that Rachel had been acting weird lately at their book club meetings. She'd been making comments about how some people had everything handed to them while others had to struggle. Emma said she thought Rachel was just going through a rough patch at work, but now it all made sense. The next day, I met up with Sarah, who'd been friends with both of us since sophomore year. Sarah was shocked when I explained what happened. She kept saying she never would have expected this from Rachel. But then Sarah admitted Rachel had been texting her lately asking questions about my relationship with Alex. Rachel wanted to know if we ever fought or if Alex seemed happy. Sarah thought Rachel was just being a concerned friend, but now she realized Rachel was looking for problems that didn't exist. Sarah said she felt guilty for not seeing the warning signs. I talked to 3 more friends over the next few days and got similar reactions. Most of them were horrified and said they'd support whatever I decided to do about the friendship. But 2 of them tried to make excuses for Rachel. My friend Lisa said Rachel had been struggling with depression for months, and maybe she wasn't thinking clearly. Lisa thought I told Lisa I understood Rachel was struggling, but that didn't give her the right to try to destroy my relationship. My other friend Mark said he'd noticed Rachel getting jealous whenever couples posted happy photos on social media. He said Rachel would make bitter comments about how relationships were just luck, and some people didn't deserve what they had. While I was dealing with telling our friends, Rachel started texting me constantly. The first message came the morning after I talked to Jen. Rachel wrote that she knew I was probably telling people what happened, and she understood. She said she just wanted another chance to explain everything. I didn't respond. An hour later, she sent another text saying she'd do anything to fix this and prove she could be a better friend. I deleted it without replying. Over the next 3 days, Rachel sent me at least 20 messages. Some were apologies, some were her trying to explain her mental state. Some were her begging me to at least acknowledge her messages. I didn't respond to any of them. I needed space to process the betrayal and figure out how I felt without her constant presence in my phone. Alex noticed I was getting texts from Rachel and asked if I wanted him to talk to her. I said no because I didn't want to give her any attention at all. Then Alex brought up something I hadn't even thought about. He said Rachel still had a spare key to our apartment and maybe we should change the locks. I realized he was right. The idea of Rachel being able to walk into our home whenever she wanted made me feel sick. We decided to go to the hardware store that Saturday and get new locks installed. Saturday morning, we drove to the big hardware store across town. Alex knew more about locks than I did, so he picked out these heavy-duty deadbolts that were supposed to be really secure. The guy at the store showed us how to install them and said it wasn't too hard if we followed the instructions. We bought 2 locks, one for the front door and one for the back door that led to our little patio. When we got home, Alex spread all the pieces out on the kitchen table and started reading the instructions. I made us sandwiches while he figured out what tools we needed. Then we spent the whole afternoon installing the new locks. Alex did most of the work, but I helped by holding things in place and handing him tools. It took way longer than we expected because the old locks didn't want to come out easily. By the time we finished, it was almost dinner time and we were both exhausted. But when I locked the new deadbolt and knew Rachel couldn't get in anymore, I felt this huge sense of relief. It was both practical and like we were physically shutting her out of our lives. The next morning, my mom called. My sister had told her everything that happened with Rachel. My mom was absolutely furious. She started yelling into the phone about what kind of person would do something like this. She said Rachel always seemed a little too interested in my life and my relationships. She'd noticed Rachel asking lots of questions about Alex and our plans for the future. My mom thought it was just Rachel being a close friend who cared about me. Now she realized Rachel had been obsessing over my relationship in an unhealthy way. My mom wanted to call Rachel's parents and tell them what their daughter had done. I asked her please not to do that because I didn't want to make the situation even more complicated. My mom said fine, but if Rachel ever came near me again, she was going to have some choice words for her. After talking to my mom, I realized I needed professional help to deal with this. I wasn't sleeping well because I kept replaying our entire friendship in my head. I'd lie awake at night thinking about all the times we hung out and wondering what was real and what was Rachel secretly resenting me. I'd remember her helping me pick out furniture for the apartment and wonder if she was jealous the whole time. I'd think about her being my maid of honor at the engagement party and question whether she was genuinely happy for me or already planning to hurt me. It was driving me crazy. I looked up therapists in my area and found one who had openings that week. Her name was Dr. Martinez, and she specialized in friendship issues and betrayal trauma. My first appointment with Dr. Martinez was on Wednesday afternoon. Her office was in this old house that had been converted into therapy spaces. The waiting room had comfortable chairs and calming music playing. When Dr. Martinez came out to get me, she seemed really nice and easy to talk to. I sat down on her couch and just started talking. I told her everything from the beginning. Rachel's fake confession, my investigation, the evidence I found, Rachel's admission about being jealous. Dr. Martinez listened without interrupting and took notes. When I finished, she asked me what I was struggling with most. I said I couldn't stop replaying our friendship and wondering what was real. She said that was a normal response to this kind of betrayal. Then she told me something that actually helped. She said Rachel's jealousy probably developed gradually over time and didn't erase the genuine friendship we had in earlier years. She said people can have real feelings of care and love for someone while also developing resentment toward them. It wasn't all fake, but it also wasn't all real. That helped me understand that I didn't have to throw away every good memory just because Rachel's feelings changed later on. 2 weeks after the coffee shop confrontation with Rachel, I was home alone on a Tuesday afternoon when the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw Rachel standing on our doorstep. My stomach dropped. I didn't want to deal with her, but I also knew she'd probably keep ringing the bell if I ignored her. Before I could decide what to do, Alex came out of the bedroom where he'd been working on his laptop. He'd heard the doorbell too. He looked through the peephole and his face got hard. He opened the door, but only a crack with the chain still on. Rachel looked terrible. Her eyes were red and puffy like she'd been crying for days. Her hair was messy and she was wearing sweatpants and an old t-shirt. Alex didn't give her a chance to start talking. He told her firmly that she needed to leave and stop contacting me. His voice was calm, but there was steel in it that I'd never heard before. Rachel started crying harder and said she just wanted to talk to me for 5 minutes. Alex said no. I'd made it clear I needed space, and she needed to respect that. Rachel tried to look past him to see if I was there, but Alex blocked her view. She said she knew she messed up and she was getting help now. Alex said that was good, but it didn't change what she did. He said I needed time and space away from her and she needed to accept that. Rachel kept trying to argue, but Alex just repeated that she needed to leave. Finally, he said if she didn't leave right now, he was going to call the police for trespassing. That seemed to get through to her. She took a step back from the door. Then Rachel really broke down. She was sobbing so hard she could barely talk. She said she'd been seeing a therapist too and was starting to understand how badly she messed up. She said she never meant to hurt me this much and she was so sorry. Alex's voice got a little softer, but he still didn't back down. He said he was glad she was seeing a therapist and working on herself. But he said that didn't change the fact that she tried to destroy our relationship with lies. He said I needed space from her right now and maybe forever. He told her the best thing she could do was respect my boundaries and leave me alone. Then he closed the door while Rachel was still standing there crying. I'd been watching from the hallway where Rachel couldn't see me. After Alex closed the door, I went to the living room window and looked out through the curtain. Rachel was still standing on our doorstep with her shoulders shaking. She stood there for maybe 2 minutes just crying. Then she finally turned around and walked slowly back to her car. She got in and sat there for another few minutes before starting the engine and driving away. I felt sad more than angry watching her leave. Our friendship was completely over and there was no going back from what she'd done, but I could see she was genuinely struggling with her own issues. That didn't excuse what she did, but it made me feel a little less angry and a little more just sad about the whole situation. The next day, I got a Facebook message from Janet, Rachel's friend, who'd commented on those cryptic Instagram posts. Janet said she wanted to apologize for not seeing the warning signs earlier. She said she'd been thinking a lot about Rachel's behavior over the past few months. Rachel had been obsessing over my relationship with Alex constantly. She'd bring up me and Alex in every conversation and compare her own life to mine. Janet said she thought Rachel was just going through a rough time and would get over it. Now she realized it was way more serious than that. Janet said she felt guilty for not saying something sooner. Maybe if she'd confronted Rachel about the jealousy earlier, Rachel wouldn't have spiraled into making up the fake affair story. I wrote back to Janet and told her I didn't blame her at all. I said there was no way she could have predicted Rachel would do something this extreme. I appreciated the apology, but Janet shouldn't feel responsible for Rachel's choices. Janet wrote back saying she was glad I didn't hate her for still being friends with Rachel. Then she told me that Rachel's family was trying to get her into more intensive therapy. Janet said Rachel's parents were really worried about her mental health after this incident. They'd known Rachel was struggling, but didn't realize how bad it had gotten until everything came out. Janet said Rachel's mom had called her asking about what happened, and Janet told her the truth. Now Rachel's whole family was involved in trying to get her proper help. I knew we couldn't let what Rachel did stop us from living our lives. Alex and I sat at our kitchen table that weekend with wedding magazines and a notebook. We started making lists of people to invite to our engagement party. We'd been putting it off because of everything that happened, but now it felt important to celebrate what we had. Alex wrote down his coworkers and college friends while I texted my cousins and work friends. We decided on a date 3 weeks away and ordered invitations online. Picking out the design together felt normal and good. We chose one with silver lettering that said, "Join us in celebrating our engagement," and spent an hour addressing envelopes. Every invitation we sealed felt like we were taking back control of our story. Rachel had tried to make our relationship about her lies, but this party would be about our actual love and commitment. Alex kissed my forehead while we worked and told me he was proud of us for not letting her win. The next day, I got a text from my friend Melissa asking if Rachel would be at the party. She said she was still friends with both of us and didn't want things to be awkward. I stared at my phone for a minute before typing back that Rachel definitely would not be there. Melissa wrote back asking if I was sure because Rachel was really struggling, and maybe having her there would help everyone move forward. I felt my chest get tight reading that. I called Melissa instead of texting and told her firmly that this was my celebration. I said Rachel tried to destroy my relationship with calculated lies, and I wasn't going to have her at my party pretending everything was fine. Melissa got quiet, and then said she understood. But 2 days later, my friend Brad texted asking the same thing. He said Rachel had been reaching out to mutual friends saying she wanted to apologize in person. I copy-pasted my response to Melissa and sent it to Brad. He replied with just okay, which felt cold. Then my college roommate Emma called and started the conversation with how Rachel seemed genuinely sorry. I cut her off and said I needed people to respect my boundaries right now. Emma sighed and said she got it, but thought I was being harsh. I hung up feeling frustrated that people expected me to make Rachel feel better about what she did to me. Over the next week, 3 people told me they couldn't come to the party. Brad said he had a work thing that came up suddenly. Emma said her car was having issues and she couldn't make the drive. My friend Tyler just said he was sorry, but he couldn't make it and didn't give a reason. I knew they were dropping out because they felt caught between me and Rachel. It hurt more than I expected. These were people I'd known for years, and they were choosing to stay neutral instead of supporting me. Alex reminded me that the people who truly cared about us would be there. He was right, but it still stung to see who was willing to show up and who wasn't. I deleted Brad and Tyler from my phone contacts. If they couldn't be there for me during something this important, I didn't need them in my life. My sister called and asked how party planning was going. When I told her about the people dropping out, she got mad on my behalf. She said anyone who couldn't see how wrong Rachel's actions were didn't deserve to be at our celebration anyway. Hearing her say that made me feel less alone. The night of the party arrived and I spent 2 hours getting ready. I wore a blue dress I'd bought specifically for this, and Alex wore the shirt I loved on him. We got to the venue early to set up. My sister was already there hanging decorations, and my mom was arranging flowers on the tables. Alex's parents showed up with trays of food, and his brother brought a cooler full of drinks. Jen arrived with her boyfriend and immediately hugged me. She'd brought a beautiful cake with our names on it. As more people showed up, I realized the room was filling with exactly the right people. My cousins, Alex's coworkers, my work friends who'd supported me through everything. Nobody mentioned Rachel's absence. Nobody asked uncomfortable questions. We ate and laughed, and Alex's dad made a toast about how happy he was to welcome me to the family. I looked around at all these faces and felt genuinely happy. Rachel not being there didn't create some obvious hole in the celebration. If anything, her absence meant everyone there was someone who truly supported us. Alex held my hand under the table and squeezed it. I squeezed back. Halfway through the party, Jen pulled me aside near the bathroom. She had her phone in her hand and looked uncertain. She showed me a message from Rachel. It was long, maybe 3 paragraphs. Rachel wrote that she took full responsibility for everything she did. She said she wasn't asking Jen to pick sides or stop being my friend. She wrote that she hoped I had a beautiful party and a happy life with Alex. She said she was getting help and understood why I couldn't forgive her. Jen asked if I wanted her to respond or just ignore it. I read the message twice. It did seem genuine. Rachel wasn't making excuses or trying to paint herself as the victim. But I still wasn't ready to think about forgiving her. I told Jen she could respond if she wanted, but I didn't need to know what she said. Jen nodded and put her phone away. She said she understood I needed time and space. We went back to the party and I pushed thoughts of Rachel out of my mind. This night was about me and Alex, not about her. Later, my sister stood up with her wine glass and asked for everyone's attention. She said she wanted to make a toast to me and Alex. She talked about how she'd watched our relationship grow over 3 years. She said real love was built on trust and honesty, and real friendship meant supporting people through hard times instead of tearing them down. Everyone raised their glasses, and I knew my sister was talking about Rachel without saying her name. It felt good to have my family so clearly on my side. My mom was wiping tears and nodding along. Alex's mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. After my sister sat down, other people started sharing stories about me and Alex. His college roommate told embarrassing stories about when they first met. My cousin talked about how happy I seemed whenever I talked about Alex. The whole night felt like proof that Rachel's lies hadn't damaged anything real. We had each other, and we had people who loved us. That was enough. A month passed, and life started feeling normal again. I stopped checking my phone constantly for messages from Rachel. I stopped replaying our friendship in my head, trying to figure out when things went wrong. Alex and I fell into our regular routines of work and dinners and weekend plans. Then one Saturday, I was at the grocery store picking up stuff for dinner. I was in the produce section looking at tomatoes when I saw Carlos near the bananas. He saw me at the same time, and his whole face changed. He looked uncomfortable and guilty. I realized he probably knew I'd figured out the truth. He knew I'd talked to Mrs. de Torres and checked the timelines. He knew that I knew Rachel had been describing him when she claimed to be with Alex. We stood there for a second, just looking at each other across the produce bins. Part of me wanted to leave before he could say anything, but another part of me was curious what he'd say if we actually talked. Carlos walked over slowly. He had his hands in his pockets and kept his voice quiet. He said he wanted to apologize for his part in what happened. He said he had no idea Rachel was using their hookups to build a fake story about Alex. He thought they were just casually seeing each other again after their breakup. He said when he found out what she'd done, he felt sick about it. I believed him because he looked genuinely ashamed. I told him I didn't blame him since he didn't know what Rachel was planning. But I said the whole situation was really messed up. He agreed and said Rachel had always been a little obsessed with comparing herself to other people. He said when they dated, she was constantly talking about her friends' relationships and jobs. He mentioned that Rachel seemed to be getting actual help now from what he'd heard through mutual friends. I just nodded. I didn't want to talk about Rachel's therapy or mental health with her ex-boyfriend in the produce section. Carlos said he hoped Alex and I were doing okay. I said we were fine and then grabbed my tomatoes and walked away. The whole conversation lasted maybe 3 minutes, but it felt important somehow. Like another piece of the puzzle clicking into place. 2 weeks later, Alex came home from work with huge news. He'd gotten a promotion to senior project manager. It came with a significant raise, almost $15,000 more a year. We celebrated by ordering expensive takeout and looking at real estate websites on our laptop. We'd been renting our apartment for 2 years, but with Alex's new salary, we could start saving for a house. We spent the whole evening looking at listings in neighborhoods we liked. Alex pointed out houses with big backyards, and I looked for ones with updated kitchens. We made a list of must-haves and nice-to-haves. We calculated how much we could save each month and figured out we could probably afford a down payment in a year or maybe 2. Planning our future together like this felt healing. Rachel had tried to destroy what we were building, but here we were looking at houses and talking about the life we'd have together. Alex pulled me close on the couch and said he couldn't wait to own a home with me. I felt the same way. Everything we were working toward felt real and solid. Nothing Rachel had done could take that away from us. My therapist suggested I start journaling about everything that happened with Rachel. She said writing it out might help me process all the complicated feelings I was dealing with. I bought a plain black notebook at the drugstore on my way home from our session. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a pen and just started writing everything down. I wrote about the coffee shop confession and how sick I felt. I wrote about finding all the evidence that proved Rachel was lying. I wrote about confronting her and hearing her admit she made it all up because she was jealous. The words poured out of me for almost 2 hours. My hand cramped up, but I kept going. When I finally stopped, I had filled 23 pages. I felt lighter somehow, like putting it all on paper made it less heavy to carry around in my head. I started writing in that notebook every few days, sometimes just a few sentences about how I was feeling, sometimes pages and pages. It became a way to track my own healing. I could look back at entries from 2 weeks ago and see how much better I was doing. The anger felt less sharp. The betrayal didn't consume every thought anymore. Writing it all down made the whole experience feel more manageable, like something I could work through instead of something that would break me. 3 months passed. Alex and I settled into our new house. Work kept me busy. My therapy sessions helped. I was sleeping better and smiling more. Then one afternoon, Janet texted asking if she could drop something off at my place. I said okay, and she showed up 20 minutes later with a sealed envelope. She handed it to me at my front door and said Rachel had asked her to deliver it. Janet looked uncomfortable. She said she hadn't read it, but Rachel had been very specific about wanting me to have it. I thanked Janet and she left quickly. I stood in my entryway holding this envelope with my name written on it in Rachel's handwriting. My stomach twisted. I thought about throwing it away without reading it. But I also felt curious. I opened it carefully and pulled out 3 pages of notebook paper covered in Rachel's neat script. The letter started with an apology. Rachel wrote that she took full responsibility for everything she did. She said there was no excuse for trying to destroy my relationship with Alex. She explained she'd been in intensive therapy twice a week since everything happened. Her therapist diagnosed her with some issues related to comparison and self-worth. Rachel wrote about how she'd been jealous of me for years, but never dealt with those feelings in a healthy way. She said watching me get engaged triggered something in her that made her act in a way she never thought she was capable of. The letter went on for pages. She talked about the work she was doing in therapy to understand why she did what she did. She said she didn't expect me to forgive her or ever speak to her again. She just wanted me to know she was genuinely working on herself and taking responsibility. She ended by saying she hoped I was happy, and that Alex and I had a beautiful life together. I read the letter 3 times. Part of me wanted to rip it up. Part of me felt sad for Rachel and what she was going through. Part of me appreciated that she wasn't making excuses or asking for anything from me. I brought the letter to my next therapy session. My therapist read it carefully and then asked me how it made me feel. I said I didn't really know. Angry still, but also kind of relieved that Rachel was getting help. My therapist said that was a normal response. We talked about forgiveness and what that actually means. She said forgiveness is a process, not a single decision. She said I didn't owe Rachel forgiveness just because she apologized. But she also said holding on to anger and resentment only hurts me in the long run. We spent the whole session talking about what I wanted to do with this letter and how I wanted to move forward. My therapist helped me see that I could acknowledge Rachel's apology without letting her back into my life. I could hope she gets better without having a relationship with her. Those things weren't contradictory. By the end of the session, I felt clearer about what I needed to do. I needed to respond in some way. Not for Rachel, but for myself. I needed to close this chapter on my own terms. I spent a week thinking about what to say. I wrote several drafts in my journal before I settled on the right words. I kept it short and clear. I wrote that I received her letter and appreciated her taking responsibility. I said I hoped therapy helped her work through her issues. But I also said I wasn't ready for any contact or friendship, and I might never be ready for that. I said I needed to protect my own peace and mental health. I thanked her for respecting my boundaries going forward. I read it over probably 50 times, making sure every word was right. Then I put it in an envelope and texted Janet asking if she could deliver it to Rachel for me. Janet agreed immediately. She came by the next day and took the envelope. She gave me a hug and said she thought I was handling everything really well. After she left, I felt this sense of closure. I'd set a clear boundary. I'd acknowledged Rachel's apology without opening the door to more contact. It felt like the right thing to do. Alex and I started seriously planning our wedding. We'd been engaged for over a year, but after everything with Rachel, we'd put the planning on hold. Now we were ready to move forward. We sat down one Saturday morning with wedding magazines and a laptop and started making decisions. We picked a date for next spring, almost exactly a year away. We looked at venues and found a beautiful garden space that had an opening on our date. We booked it that same day. Over the next few weeks, we made more choices. We decided on colors and a general theme. We started a guest list. We talked about whether we wanted a big wedding or something smaller and more intimate. Every conversation felt easy and natural. We agreed on almost everything without any conflict. I realized how much stronger our relationship had become after surviving Rachel's manipulation. We communicated better now. We trusted each other more deeply. We'd been tested in a way most couples don't experience until much later, and we'd come through it together. Planning our wedding felt like celebrating not just our love, but also our resilience. Nothing Rachel did had broken us. If anything, we were more solid now than before. My sister came over one evening to help me look at bridesmaid dresses online. We were scrolling through options when she asked me something I hadn't expected. She wanted to know if I was worried about trusting new friends after what Rachel did. I paused and really thought about it. I told her I was definitely more cautious now. I paid more attention to how people talked about others and whether they seemed genuinely happy for me or resentful. But I also said I was trying not to let one person's actions make me suspicious of everyone. Rachel's betrayal taught me to watch for red flags, but it didn't make me want to close myself off completely. My sister nodded and said that seemed really healthy. She said she'd been worried I might have trouble opening up to people again. I admitted it was something I thought about, but I refused to let Rachel's issues turn me into someone who couldn't trust anyone. That would mean she'd damaged me permanently, and I wasn't going to give her that power. My sister smiled and said she was proud of how I was handling everything. We went back to looking at dresses, but that conversation stuck with me. It felt good to recognize I was moving forward in a healthy way. I joined a book club through work. One of my coworkers had been inviting me for months, and I finally said yes. The first meeting was at someone's house I'd never been to before. I walked in nervous, not sure if I'd fit in with this group. But everyone was friendly and welcoming. We talked about the book we'd all read, and then the conversation shifted to other topics. I found myself laughing and genuinely enjoying these people's company. None of them knew Rachel. None of them had any connection to that whole situation. It felt refreshing to build new friendships with people who only knew me as I was now, not as the person who'd been betrayed by her best friend. Over the next few weeks, I went to more book club meetings. I started grabbing coffee with a few of the women between meetings. These friendships felt different from what I had with Rachel. They were based on common interests and genuine connection, not just history and habit. I realized I'd stayed friends with Rachel partly because we'd known each other so long, even though our friendship had become unbalanced and unhealthy. These new friends felt more equal, more reciprocal. It felt good to have fresh starts with people who had no baggage attached. Jen called me one afternoon just to chat. We'd stayed close through everything and talked regularly. During our conversation, she mentioned she'd seen Rachel at their gym a few times recently. She said Rachel always asked how I was doing, but Jen never shared any details about my life. Jen wanted to make sure that was okay with me. I told her I really appreciated that she respected my boundaries like that. I said I was glad Rachel was asking instead of trying to contact me directly, because it showed she was actually respecting the limits I'd set. Jen agreed and said Rachel seemed to be doing better overall. She looked healthier and seemed more stable. But Jen made it clear she wasn't trying to advocate for Rachel or suggest I should forgive her. She just thought I might want to know Rachel was respecting my wishes. I thanked Jen for telling me and for being such a good friend through all of this. After we hung up, I felt okay about what she'd told me. I didn't feel angry or upset that Rachel was asking about me. It actually felt like progress that she was respecting my boundaries and not pushing for contact. That was all I could really ask for at this point. Alex surprised me with a weekend trip to the mountains for our 4-year anniversary. He'd booked a cabin without telling me and packed my bag while I was at work. When I got home, he told me to get in the car. We drove 3 hours into the mountains and arrived at this beautiful cabin surrounded by trees. We spent the weekend hiking during the day and sitting by the fire at night. On one of our hikes, Alex started talking about how much we'd grown as a couple over the past year. He said the Rachel situation could have destroyed us if we'd let it, but instead it made us stronger. He said he felt like he knew me better now and trusted our relationship more deeply. I agreed completely. We talked about all the ways we'd improved our communication and learned to support each other through hard things. The Rachel situation felt like something that happened to different people now. We were different from we'd been a year ago. We were more mature, more aware, more intentional about our relationship. Standing on that mountain trail with Alex, looking out at the view, I felt grateful for everything we'd been through together. The good and the bad had all shaped us into the couple we were now. I realized one morning that I'd slept through the entire night without waking up once. That hadn't happened in months. Ever since Rachel's confession, I'd been waking up at 3 or 4 in the morning with my mind racing, replaying everything that happened. But lately I'd been sleeping better. I wasn't constantly thinking about the betrayal anymore. It didn't consume my thoughts the way it had for so long. At my next therapy session, I mentioned this to my therapist. She smiled and said it was a really good sign. She explained that when we process trauma properly, our brains eventually stop treating it as an active threat. The fact that I could sleep through the night and go whole days without obsessing over what Rachel did meant I was genuinely healing and moving forward. She said I'd done the work necessary to process what happened instead of just pushing it down or pretending it didn't hurt. I felt proud of myself hearing that. I'd worked hard in therapy and in my own life to deal with this in a healthy way. The healing wasn't linear and I still had bad days sometimes. But overall, I was doing so much better than I'd been 3 months ago. Passed and I started making plans for the house hunt in earnest. We spent weekends driving through different neighborhoods, walking through open houses and imagining where we'd put our furniture. Some places felt too close to areas where Rachel and I used to hang out, so we crossed those off immediately. I wanted our home to be in a space that had zero connection to that part of my life. Alex understood completely. and never pushed back when I said a place didn't feel right. 3 months later, we found it. A small 2-bedroom house with a big backyard in a neighborhood 30 minutes from our apartment. The kitchen needed updating and the bathroom was dated, but the moment I walked through the front door, I felt at home. Alex saw my face and knew this was the one. We put in an offer that same day and somehow it got accepted over 2 other bids. The closing process took 6 weeks and felt like forever, but finally we got the keys and stood in our empty living room as homeowners. That first night we ordered pizza and sat on the floor eating straight from the box, talking about paint colors and furniture placement. Over the next month, we spent every evening and weekend working on the house. Alex painted the bedroom a soft gray while I tackled the kitchen cabinets in white. We ripped up the old carpet together and had hardwood floors refinished. I found curtains at a home goods store that matched perfectly, and Alex built shelves in the living room for our books. Every wall we painted, every piece of furniture we arranged, every decoration we hung felt like we were creating something that belonged only to us. This house had no history with Rachel, no memories of the 3 of us furniture shopping or her giving opinions on color choices. It was completely ours. One Saturday afternoon, while we were painting the spare bedroom that would eventually be an office, I realized I felt lighter than I had in months. Creating this space together, making decisions about our home, planning our future in these rooms, all of it felt freeing in a way I couldn't fully explain. The house became our project, our focus, our fresh start. My sister drove up one weekend to see the house once we'd finished most of the major projects. She walked through every room, admiring the paint colors and the way we'd arranged everything. We sat in the backyard with iced tea, and she told me she was proud of how I'd handled everything with Rachel. She said most people would have either believed the lie immediately and destroyed their relationship, or ignored all the evidence and stayed in denial. The fact that I'd investigated carefully, looked at the facts, and made decisions based on evidence instead of emotion showed real maturity. She also said she was proud that I'd set clear boundaries with Rachel and stuck to them, even when it was hard and even when mutual friends tried to push me to forgive and move on before I was ready. Her words meant more than she probably realized. Having my sister's support and respect through all of this had been huge, and knowing she thought I'd handled it well helped me feel more confident in my choices. We spent the rest of the afternoon planning the housewarming party we wanted to throw in a few weeks. 2 weeks later, our house was full of people for the housewarming party. My parents were there, along with Alex's family, my sister and her husband, and about 20 friends. Jen came with her boyfriend, and several of my book club friends showed up with wine and plants for the yard. Alex's coworkers brought food, and his brother helped him set up a speaker system in the backyard. I stood in the kitchen at one point, watching everyone talk and laugh, and felt this wave of gratitude. These were people who'd stood by us during the Rachel situation, who'd listened when I needed to talk, who'd respected my boundaries and supported my decisions. Not one person at this party had tried to force me to forgive Rachel before I was ready, or made me feel bad for cutting her out of my life. They were authentic, genuine people who cared about me and Alex. My mom came up beside me and squeezed my hand, and I realized I was tearing up a little. She asked if I was okay, and I nodded, telling her I was just grateful for everyone here. She smiled and said, "That's what real friends and family do. They show up when it matters." The party went late into the evening, with people sitting around our backyard fire pit telling stories and making plans for future get-togethers. By the time everyone left, I felt exhausted but happy. Alex and I cleaned up together, loading the dishwasher and putting away leftover food, and he mentioned how great it felt to celebrate our home with people who genuinely cared about us. I agreed completely. A few weeks after the housewarming party, I woke up one morning and realized I'd gone 3 full days without thinking about Rachel or what she'd done. I was getting ready for work when it hit me that the betrayal wasn't constantly on my mind anymore. For months after it happened, I'd wake up thinking about it, replay conversations during my commute, analyze everything during lunch breaks. It had consumed so much mental energy. But lately I'd been focused on work projects, the house, wedding planning ideas, time with Alex and friends. The Rachel situation wasn't taking up space in my head the way it used to. At my next therapy session, I mentioned this shift to my therapist. She smiled and said it was a really good sign that I'd processed the trauma properly, instead of just burying it or pretending it didn't hurt. She explained that when we do the hard work of actually dealing with betrayal and grief, our brains eventually stop treating it as an active threat that needs constant attention. The fact that whole days could pass without me obsessing over what Rachel did meant I was genuinely healing and moving forward with my life. I felt proud hearing that because I had worked hard in therapy and on my own to deal with this in a healthy way. The healing wasn't perfect, and I still had moments where I felt angry or sad about losing that friendship. But overall, I was doing so much better than I'd been even just a few months ago. One evening, Alex brought up the idea of setting a wedding date. We'd been engaged for over a year but hadn't wanted to plan anything major while dealing with the Rachel fallout. Now that we owned a house together and I was in a better place emotionally, he thought maybe we should look at dates for next spring. I felt a rush of excitement at the suggestion. For so long, the engagement had been overshadowed by Rachel's manipulation and the aftermath of her confession. The idea of actually planning our wedding without any of that darkness hanging over us felt amazing. We pulled out a calendar and started looking at weekends in April and May. Alex suggested we visit a few venues the following weekend, and I agreed immediately. Sitting there making plans for our future, picking potential dates, talking about who we'd invite and what kind of ceremony we wanted, I felt like we'd finally moved past what Rachel tried to do to us. She'd wanted to destroy our relationship and make me doubt Alex, but instead we were stronger and more committed than ever. We'd earned this happiness through everything we'd been through together. A few days later, I ran into Carlos at the grocery store again. He was in the produce section and looked up just as I was reaching for tomatoes. We made eye contact and he walked over, asking how I was doing. I told him things were good, that Alex and I had bought a house and were planning our wedding for next spring. His face lit up and he said he was really happy for us, that he was glad Rachel's actions hadn't destroyed something real and good. He mentioned he'd heard through mutual acquaintances that I'd handled everything with a lot of grace and intelligence. I thanked him and said I hoped he was doing well too. He said he was seeing someone new and things were going better for him. We chatted for a few more minutes about nothing important, then said goodbye and went our separate ways. The interaction was pleasant and normal, and I realized I didn't feel any anger toward Carlos anymore. He'd been caught up in Rachel's mess without knowing what she was planning, and he seemed like he'd moved on with his life too. At my book club meeting the next week, a few of the women asked about my wedding plans. I found myself talking about venues and color schemes and dress ideas with pure excitement and joy. One of them mentioned that planning a wedding must be bittersweet since my best friend wasn't involved, and I realized the question didn't sting the way it might have months ago. I told them honestly that Rachel and I weren't friends anymore, and it was for the best, and that I had my sister as my maid of honor, and was surrounded by people who genuinely supported me and Alex. I wasn't sad about Rachel missing these moments anymore. I'd moved on completely from that friendship and from the pain of her betrayal. The conversation shifted to centerpiece ideas, and nobody brought up Rachel again. Later that week, Jen called and said Rachel had sent her a message. My stomach tensed for a second, but Jen quickly reassured me that it wasn't anything bad. Rachel had apparently seen on social media that Alex and I were getting married and wanted Jen to pass along that she was genuinely happy for us and hoped we had a beautiful life together. Jen said Rachel made it clear she wasn't asking to reconnect or be invited to anything. She just wanted me to know she wished us well. I sat with that information for a minute, then told Jen I appreciated her passing it along and that I hoped Rachel was doing okay, but I still had no desire to reconnect or have any contact. Jen said she completely understood, and that Rachel had seemed to respect that boundary. The message felt like closure in a way, knowing that Rachel could be happy for me from a distance without trying to force her way back into my life. A full year after Rachel's fake confession, I sat in our living room one evening looking around at the life Alex and I had built. We were in our house that we'd bought and decorated together, surrounded by photos from our housewarming party and plans for our spring wedding. My relationship with Alex was stronger than it had ever been because we'd survived something that could have destroyed us. We communicated better, trusted each other more deeply, and appreciated what we had. Rachel's attempt to tear us apart had actually made us unbreakable. I thought about the past year and everything that had happened, and I felt grateful for how things had turned out despite the pain. I'd learned who my real friends were, discovered how strong my relationship actually was, and developed the ability to set healthy boundaries even when it was difficult. One evening, I pulled out my journal and wrote a final entry about the whole experience. I wrote about the initial shock and betrayal, the investigation that revealed the truth, the confrontation with Rachel, and the long process of healing afterward. I acknowledged the pain of losing a friendship that had lasted since middle school, but also recognized the growth that came from it. I'd learned to trust my instincts, to look for evidence before jumping to conclusions, to protect my relationship while still being fair and thorough. I'd learned that sometimes people we love can become toxic when they're struggling with their own issues, and that setting boundaries doesn't make me a bad person. I'd learned that Alex and I could handle hard things together and come out stronger on the other side. Most importantly, I'd learned that real friends and real love don't crumble under pressure or manipulation. The people who truly cared about me had stayed, had supported me, had respected my choices. Alex had been patient and understanding through my investigation and healing process. My sister had been there every step of the way. Jen and my other friends had shown up when it mattered. I closed the journal and put it away, feeling like I'd finally closed that chapter of my life completely. The morning of my wedding day arrived with perfect spring weather. I woke up early in the hotel room I was sharing with my sister, and for the first time in over a year, I didn't think about Rachel at all when I opened my eyes. My sister was already awake, ordering room service breakfast for us. She hugged me and said this was going to be the best day of my life. We spent the morning getting ready with my mom and a few close friends, doing hair and makeup while laughing about silly things. My sister looked beautiful in her maid of honor dress, and I felt grateful that she was standing beside me instead of someone who had tried to destroy my relationship. The ceremony took place in a garden venue that Alex and I had picked out together. I walked down the aisle and saw Alex waiting for me, and his eyes got watery when he saw me in my dress. We said our vows in front of everyone who genuinely loved and supported us. Jen was there with her husband, my book club friends came, Alex's family filled several rows, and every single person in that garden wanted us to be happy. I didn't feel any absence or regret about Rachel not being there. The person I thought was my best friend for so many years had never really been the friend I needed. The reception was everything we wanted. Alex and I had our first dance to a song we both loved, and halfway through he pulled me close and whispered that he was grateful for everything we'd been through, because it proved nothing could shake what we have. I told him I completely agreed and that we were stronger for surviving it. We danced with our families, ate amazing food, and celebrated with people who had stood by us during the hardest time. My sister gave a toast about real friendship and real love, and everyone raised their glasses to us. That night felt perfect in a way that had nothing to do with fancy decorations or expensive details. It was perfect because we were surrounded by authentic people who genuinely cared about our happiness. 2 days later, Alex and I flew to Italy for our honeymoon. We spent 2 weeks exploring Rome, Florence, and the Amalfi Coast. We ate incredible food, walked through ancient ruins, and spent lazy afternoons on beaches. I barely thought about Rachel or the betrayal at all. When memories of that time did come up, they felt distant and unimportant compared to the incredible future stretching out in front of us. That chapter of my life was completely closed. I'd processed it, learned from it, and moved on. Alex and I talked about our plans for the house, about maybe getting a dog, about trips we wanted to take together. We talked about everything except the past, because the past didn't matter anymore. When we got back home from Italy, we settled into married life in our house. Our real friends lived nearby and came over for dinners and game nights. Alex got another promotion at work, and I was doing well in my career too. We adopted a rescue dog named Biscuit, who made our house feel even more like a home. Every morning I woke up next to Alex in our bedroom, in our house, living the life we'd built together. What Rachel had meant to destroy had only made us unbreakable. Her jealousy and manipulation had tested our relationship in ways we never expected, but we'd come through it stronger and more connected than ever. I was genuinely happy with how everything had turned out. The fake confession that had devastated me for 36 hours had ultimately shown me who my real friends were, and how solid my relationship with Alex actually was. We'd built something real that couldn't be shaken by lies or manipulation. Looking back now, I felt grateful for the lesson even though it had been painful to learn.